You're listening to ABA One-on-One Podcast.
Hi guys, CJ here. We currently have a few positions available for relationship managers. If you would like the opportunity to work in sports marketing, this could be it. The ABA is the largest pro league in the world and partnered with the AAU, representing over 700,000 athletes around the world. Building business relationships and helping bring new audiences to every business we're working with is the goal. You're not limited to one state or region. Businesses partnering with sports is always a win-win for the community. Sound interesting? Then drop us an email and get more information at jobs@aba1on1.club, and we'll get back to you right away.
Come explore the No Strings Attached e-news online magazine. Our global array of authors inspire, delight, and educate with practical and entertaining articles. And with Focus On, we help producers of film, web series, and other video content attract a wider audience. Plus, your project can stream on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and more with our media partners E360 TV and NETV. No Strings Attached e-news, focusing on human interest. Advertising available, nsaen.com.
Hey guys, it's time for a new episode of ABA One-on-One.
Open up, yeah. Open up now. Open up. Open up, yeah. Open up. Open up now. I give a damn dog, give him a bone. Give a damn dog a bone. I give a damn dog, give him a bone. Give a damn dog a bone. Give him a bone.
Welcome back to another ABA 101. Wow, today's a good show. I've got Rick back with me. Special guest in the house is Sonny Smith, Auburn coach. Wow, this is going to be a good show. Sonny, welcome to ABA 101. I know you just had a great piece there that you just said, but hey, if you could kind of recap on that again so the fans can hear it, that'd be great. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, we'll just start from early play, and I'll say one thing about the ABA. At one time, it was a league starting as a pro league years ago.
Yeah.
And I signed on to become one of the coaches at a team in France. Grenoble, I believe, was the name of the town. And I got cold feet just about the time that it was ready for me to go over there, because I wanted all my money up front, and they told me they didn't pay that way. So I said, I'm not coming. So they said, well, you got to get a coach. And guess who I got? I got a guy named Dale Harris, who ended up being one of the better pro coaches of all time. And he got his pro job by going over, I think it's Grenoble, France, maybe. And he went over there and coached, and he met up with the guy that was like the general manager and owner of the Utah Stars. And he ended up joining Utah. And from that point on, Dale went on to become the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Lakers. And now he's a book writer now. He writes a book a week, I think. So my chance to be in the pros was taken by one of my former college players named Dale Harris. I don't know if that's the name you've heard over there in Australia.
We had him on the show, Sonny.
Yeah, we had him on.
We had him on the show.
Well, he was the best man in my wedding. I was the best man in his.
Yeah, he talked about you. He talked about you.
I kept my wife, and he lost his. No,
Wow.
That's not true. That's not true.
No, that's awesome to hear, man. Yeah, no, he did talk about you, and man, what a connection. I love it.
Sonny, I want to ask you a question, if I could. Although I've known you since I was 10th grade, 9th grade, youngster. And I just, I followed you, but I want our American and Australian listeners to know a little bit about your playing and coaching days. Like I said, I remember when you were a player, but I also remember you at the number of schools that you've been at. Talk a little bit about that, if you will, some of the places.
Well, my high school career, for instance, only consisted of 7 games. I played 7 games because of illnesses that I had coming up through my freshman, sophomore, and junior years, and almost half of my senior year. So when I got out of high school, I did not have a scholarship offer. I didn't have a place to go. I was 6'1.5" and probably weighed 150 pounds. And they didn't give scholarships to guys like that. So I'm out in the cornfield hoeing corn, as they call it back in the mountains. And this car comes driving up, and the guy gets out with a suit. Well, everybody that's hoeing corn with me took off running because we were bootleggers, and we thought the guy was a lawman. Now that's a true story.
Wow.
And he turned out to be the coach at Holmes Junior College in Goodman, Mississippi, and he had seen me play in one of those little independent tournaments that they have after season's over, and he thought I might be a player for him. So I got my start at Holmes Junior College in Goodman, Mississippi. I first enrolled at a junior college in North Carolina, but I never got to play because of illness. So my career started in Mississippi at Holmes Junior College, and I played there, and I made all conference both years that I was there, but the only offer that I ended up getting was to a Division II team in southeastern Louisiana, I think was the name of the school. So I went to a 4-year school in Johnson City, Tennessee, called Milligan, and my way was paid. We didn't have any money. We were bootleggers, and they were kind of laws after us a little bit, so we weren't making any money. So I had to take what I could get, and they sent me to Milligan, and I became a teammate with Dale Harris. And Dale and I played together for years, and he became a minister, and then he became a coach, and then he became a minister again and a coach again. And Dale had a remarkable career. He's a great coach, a great person. And I went from Milligan into high school coaching, and I coached all over the world. And the reason I did, I had my eye set on playing in this upcoming ABA back in those years. It's late 50, early 60s. And I played in a tournament in South Boston, Virginia. All the ABA scouts were there, and I was the most valuable player in the tournament. Scored like 37 points. Rick can back me up. If you hired me,
Yep,
I could score for you. Well, they signed 6 players in that tournament. Larry Brown played in it. Do you remember the name Larry Brown? Doug Moe played in the tournament. They signed 6 players out of that into the ABA, and they didn't even speak to me, and I was the most valuable player in the tournament. So I realized at that point I had to get serious about coaching, because I was actually I was coaching in high school, but I was just doing it so I could get out and play basketball. Well, after that, I said, I got to be a coach. So I went to Indiana first, because that's where basketball, I thought, in high school was the best in the country. And then after I stayed there a year, I went to Kentucky. And the reason I went to Kentucky is because that was another great basketball state. And the reason I did those 2 things was to get myself ready to be able to recruit, because that's back in the day, before the black player became really the biggest factor in basketball in college. That state was filled full of good basketball players. So I'd set myself up as a recruiter, and shortly after that, I was hired at William & Mary, and that was the start of my career. The interesting thing about being a coach at William & Mary, the guy that I replaced was a guy named Hubie Brown. I don't know if everybody in this room has heard of
everybody knows Hubie Brown.
Well,
Hubie,
I replaced him, and he went to Duke. And that's how I got into my college career. From there, I went to Pepperdine. The reason I went to Pepperdine is because they offered me more money than anybody else did. So I couldn't learn how to merge on the freeway, so I didn't stay out there long.
Oh my God. Pretty
that's
cool.
incredible.
Pretty cool.
Rick, you know what your audience might want to hear. You asked me, and I don't mind talking.
Oh, I know. You.
Hey, Rick, it's wide open for you, brother. Just go for it, man. Go for it, Rick.
Well, no, a lot of that stuff. A couple things Sonny said that even I didn't know, and I said I know everything about Sonny Smith, but obviously I don't. I didn't know he went to Holmes Junior College in Mississippi.
Yes, I did. It was the only offer I had.
When I was coaching in Division I, recruited a kid out of Holmes and also another couple schools in Mississippi. But academics was not one of their strengths. So
I wouldn't have been there if it was. I wouldn't have been there if it was. Hey,
but
I'm going to tell you this. I'll tell you one thing about my junior college career. I might have been 6'2", 6'3", and probably weighed 160 pounds at the most. And our first game of the season at Holmes Junior College was against the Mississippi State freshman. And the freshman that was on the team is a name that is synonymous with basketball in the South and in the country, a guy named Bailey Howell. Bailey Howell played in the NBA for 8 to 10 years maybe. And I outplayed Bailey Howell that night in the game, and we won. And the freshmen, they had to play freshman ball back then. You couldn't go directly to varsity basketball. So the game I had against Bailey Howell was better than he did against me. And so Bailey Howell went on to be one of the top players ever in the Southeastern Conference, but it got people to looking at me as a player. I was too skinny and, all those things that you don't want to have in your resume. But I actually was getting a little bit better every year because I started in high school at a really young age. I got in my birth date being in November, so I got in right at 15. That's a little bit too young, and so I had an interesting career. I went from there to Mississippi, and because of my size and because of I could really score, I made it all state there, and I wanted to go to a major school. Well, Babe McCarthy told me, said, Sonny, you might could score against the people in the SEC, but said they would beat you to death. They'd kill you. He says, you need to play in a lesser league. Well, that drowned all my thoughts of being a major college player. So I went on to an NAIA school and played. And after I got out of college, I was, maybe 2 years out or 1 year out. I was twice the player I ever was in junior college or high school. So I played basketball in all these independent tournaments around the country. And Rick, you might pick it up there and tell them how well I did or how the things I could do.
6'3" post man could score on anybody. I remember he used to come to my high school, and back in those days, Sonny would teach me. He called it the lunge move. He said, "Well, you drop your forearm, and when the guy leans in, you just take it right through his chin." And it's illegal. Sonny said something like, "They're not gonna call that. They're not gonna call that." But no, he. What I'm really interested in, I think some of our listeners maybe too, because we talk about this with all the coaches. When you were in college coaching, you were at Auburn, you were at East Tennessee, you were at VCU, you were at several schools. What did you do in trying to create a positive culture within your team? Is there anything in particular that you did?
Well,
culture.
Well, let's say the culture type of thing. I would try to get players that fit the system and players that, like, for instance, the point, I'd like to get a point that was just a point so I could teach him to be just that, not want to play 3 or 4 different positions. I tried to recruit people that played one position, sometimes 2 positions. And by doing that, that was their job, their position. And I'd get a backup that would be a guy that could play 2 or 3 positions. He backed up 2 or 3 guys. So I started my coaching career by using 7 guys, because I realized when I started at William and Mary as assistant, we weren't going to get over 7 really good players. And so we weren't going to get to 8 and 9. Back in those days, you could get anybody in school except at a place like William and Mary. So you needed to get guys that could play one position and nobody be able to take their place and one guy to back them up. So I would recruit guys that fit the position, and that's the way I built the culture. It wasn't like this guy was playing center and thought he ought to be a forward, or a guy that was second guard, and he shot too much, so I moved him to the point. I had those type of ideas taken care of ahead of time, if that makes any sense. I recruited people that fit the position and that could run I always thought that a system was better than no system. As it turned out, I'm not so sure that that is true, because basketball today is played in a manner that you used to would not allow your people to do, because you thought it was playing wild in the streets. No constructive stuff, and no. I don't know what the word I want to use here, but you like today, you can fit a guy in at any position except a post, because now the game is a dribble drive. Well, we were doing that back in the day because nobody knew anything about plays or anything like that. But it's a different game today than it was back in the day. And guys don't realize if you're going to get into basketball, first thing you got to do is be able to catch it. The second thing, you better be able to dribble it, because we can develop a shooter somehow. But if you can't get it down there, you can't shoot it. So that's just a few ideas that I had when I first got into it. I look for people that fit the position and fit the style of play that I wanted to coach. I didn't get into anything of coaching. Until I got to Auburn, I never got players that you had to, that was superstar type quality. I never got those kind of players. And I found out when you do, you got to be a different kind of coach to coach superstars. Now, I had a number of those, Barkley being probably the highest known guy. But for instance, you didn't coach Charles Barkley the same way that you coached the rest of the guys on the team. And I'd been an old school guy who thought that you coached everybody the same. Worked them hard, got disciplined to everybody, not let anybody take days off and that type of thing. Well, Pat Dye was a football coach at Auburn. Pat Dye taught me a great lesson. Bo Jackson was a great football player that probably both of you heard. I know you've heard.
Oh, yeah.
Bo Jackson hated practice. Well, so instead of just running him to death and getting all over him, Pat Dye just ignored him. Well, all he did until Saturday. He ran over him. He was the best football player living or dead until he got that hip hit. Well, I had Barkley. Barkley was the same way. Hated practice, messed up your practice by carrying on all the time, and I tried to kill him instead of just reacting to what would make him make the team better. Just ignore him like Pat Dye did Bo Jackson, and we'd have won a lot more games. So I said the one thing that I've learned watching basketball over the years, if I had to tell a young coach, don't treat all your players the same. And if you got a super player, find out what makes him tick and makes him play hard for you and makes him respect you, and teach him that way. I was on those, teach them all the same, work them hard, don't have favorites. But the game is not played that way anymore. And I think I learned that a little too late. I had some really, really good players, but I tried to mix them in with the other players instead of mixing the other players into him.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sonny, I had a coach tell me one time that you don't, coaches become good coaches when they get good players. And he said, you don't win the Kentucky Derby with a jackass.
Well, that's
and I never forgot that.
Well, I wish I had learned that earlier. I had a great player my first year at Auburn, and his name was Bobby Caddage. And Bobby didn't like to practice. He hated practice. Well, I tried to kill him. And Bobby ended up getting hurt by doing some of the things too hard that I had him do. And he ended up with what should have been a 14 to 15 year pro career. It ended up like being a 4 or 5. And I think that you got to learn what makes your player tick. And you got to treat him the way that makes him tick and not worry about the other players say, well, he's treating him different. I was always worried about that. You treat the player the way you need to get the best out of him. And I didn't learn that until I started watching basketball as I grew up through the game. And I went from east all the way to the west and back. And so I knew the different styles. But I realized this, that the great coaches coach great players different than they do your average player. And that, I don't know if that makes sense to y'all, but it's something I had to grow into that. And I coached in a county in Tennessee. I didn't coach, I'm sorry. I was a player in the county. And four coaches there in that county won over 1,000 games. And they were unbelievably tough on their kids, treated all of them the same. And I tried when I started coaching, and one of my second jobs was with a guy named Don DeVoe, who's like a warden in a prison. I mean, he was that tough. and you know, I realized under Don that you got to be tough to get them to do things, but you also got to be able to put salve on the wound. And so the guys that I worked in under Don DeVoe, Gary Colson was a great players coach. I worked for him at Pepperdine. Don DeVoe was he was Bobby Knight's assistant that probably knew the game of basketball as well or better than Bobby. Bobby had better players than Don normally had, but Don DeVoe was a great basketball coach. So I had a chance to learn under a Bobby Knight style, and I also had a chance to learn under a Vic Bubas style, who was a great coach at Duke. And the guy that I worked for at William and Mary was a Duke guy, and so I worked under guys that I learned a lot from, and it helped me become a better head coach in college.
Yeah, when you know, CJ and Sonny. Sonny knows this. When I was coming out of junior college, I wanted to play at Virginia Tech. That was one of my, growing up in around the Roanoke area, that's my goal. So Sonny said, "Come on up to Blacksburg, and I'll get you a tryout as a walk-on." I said, "Oh my God, this could be awesome." I said, "I'm headed for the big time, the NBA here." I was already starting to lick my chops. So I get up there, and I think it was Lane Coliseum. Wasn't that the name of the school?
Yeah.
And we played scrimmage in it. And Don DeVoe, I believe, or maybe been Sonny, told me I was guarding the big blonde-headed kid. That big blonde-headed kid, one guy that I'd like to get on, his name was Alan Bristow. And a wake-up call. I knew right then I may have been one level too high, because he just flat out wore me out. And I said, "Oh Lord, I don't know. Maybe I need to go to Division II." And I did. And okay, so I'm good. But I'll never forget Sonny telling me I'm guarding the blonde-headed kid.
That blonde-headed kid.
He spent about 9 years in the NBA.
Yeah, and also played in the ABA, and then became a head coach in both at one time. And he was a special kind of guy. He was the first guy. You got to learn your players when you coach. He's the first guy I ever seen that would go into his hotel room or his room in college and sit down and get his legs crossed and sit there and meditate. And I thought this boy might be a little crazy. I don't know if I got it, but he used meditation. I thought they all used medication to get up for the game, if you know what I mean. But hey, he used meditation to get himself ready to play. And he made it all the way to the NBA as a player and played well and was a head coach in the league. And he didn't have that kind of talent, but he made himself fit into the style that he needed to make a team and to make himself better. And I learned a lot having a guy like Alan Bristow. I don't know if that name strikes you, but he coached the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA at one time. That was his only NBA job, I believe. He coached the Denver. He and Doug Moe were head coaches of the Denver team in the ABA. I cannot remember their name at this time.
That's amazing. That
That's
is
just,
amazing. What
hey,
a career.
I got to ask my one question. What was it like coaching Chuck Pearson?
Easiest job I ever had. Here's a guy that wanted to outwork you. We practiced 2 hours, and Chuck Pearson would keep you another hour to work on individual moves. He was a great player, but a great shooter, but he's kind of stiff. And we did all kind of work to loosen him up, get him to where he could beat a guy off the dribble instead of having to take all jump shots, which he wanted to shoot jumps because he was such a great shooter. But he's one of the hardest workers I ever had, one of the most dedicated players I ever coached. Now, Charles was just the opposite. Charles was only interested in the game. Charles, if I had learned how to coach superstars earlier, I might be in more Hall of Fames than I'm in right now. But I'm going to tell you that's a lesson learned way too late. Chuck Pearson was the kind of guy that you had to work hard to even stay up with him. Wow. I've never had but one like that. I had another kid named Frank Ford who was the Player of the Year in Florida, and his college career was good, but not as good as his reputation. But I coached a number of guys that you could put them in the superstar category, and I didn't learn how to coach those guys until late, very, very late in my career.
Wow. Awesome.
If you look at a pro coach, the good pro coaches know how to coach their superstars. Did you ever notice sometimes they go to the huddle and the superstar will talk more than the coach?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good coach. Yeah. That's a good coach right there, in my opinion. But it wouldn't have been for me back in the day. I told him, shut up, get in here and listen like the rest. And that would be wrong. That would be wrong. But coaching today is so different than it was back then. If I ask you guys to name the best coaches you've ever seen, certain names always come up. But I'm going to tell you, I do the radio now for one, that if you could watch his practice a few times and watch him interact with his players, you'd realize that he's one of those special type guys. His name is Bruce Pearl. Well, Bruce Pearl is different than any coach I've ever been around, but he is so dedicated to what are the good things to teach players and what they need to not know of guys that I've seen. So I marvel at some of the coaching abilities of the young guys today. They coach more the players than they do the system, because everybody's system is a little bit less not less demanding, but easier to learn than it used to be. You run set plays into a form of motion. Now you run motion into a set play.
Yeah.
At the end of a shot clock. So it's a total different game. And I had to learn all that. And what Bruce Pearl did, Bruce Pearl went through both of those phases, and he changed with the systems that changed. It changed over to, like, now the dribble drive is probably the biggest thing in the game. Well, Bruce Pearl teaches that extremely well. But the one area that he stayed with all of his old things, he is one of the best on dead ball situations that I've ever seen. He scores out of bounds plays every game a couple of times. He runs plays to get jump balls, ball out of bounds in all the different positions that you put him on in the court. He'll run plays to score and plays just to get it in. Today's coach, they look like they might not be coaching as much as the guys used to, but they're coaching the system that they're playing with the time of year that they're playing, or the time of the. Well, I'm not getting this what I want to, but the basketball changed over the years from set plays to let them play into some sets, and now the game is spread the floor, and get spacing. And Bruce Pearl is the best I've ever seen. It let them run and still be spaced. So the game, I've learned a lot watching other people.
Wow.
And players enjoy playing like that, Sonny.
Rick, let me just real quick.
Yes.
One of my boys just texted me, just listening on the show, and I said Chuck Pearson instead of Person. That's my bad. That's my bad. I want to apologize because if he's listening to the show, he might go, "F that guy," So I don't want to take a chance.
Chuck, I give you this. You always hear about coaches buying players.
Yep.
Chuck Person, the day that he signed his pro contract, gave me a Rolex watch, which is worth maybe $3,000 at that time.
Wow.
Bought a Rolex watch and slipped up and put it in my hand and walked off so he wouldn't have to listen to me tell him how I felt about it. He was one of those. He's one of those guys that gave me, I think, it's a $3,000 gold Rolex watch back in the day. And
that is cool.
Yeah, you don't have many players to do things like that. You really don't. Now, I'll give you a good example. Charles Barkley. If we were to hold something that would raise money for somebody, regardless of where he was, what he was doing, he would be there. Even after I left and went to other schools, he would come and do those things. And I treated him like a dog. But he realizes after he got old that those things might have been good for him. But I'm not so sure that's true. I think you coach players different as the game changes, but I think the real relationship is getting your players to like you and also to play hard for you.
Well, you just proved a great point. Like getting older and maturing in the game, you kind of got that Jedi Zen kind of thing kind of happening where you realize, what you thought when you were younger and where you are now, you look at it totally different. So that's a good sign. It shows that you are able to take on and learn, from whatever eras that happened in the past,
Sure.
Yeah.
I think in my time, I think I spent more time teaching players offensive moves and footwork and stuff like that, more so than I did some of the other things that are so valuable in today's game. You gotta get players that believe in you as a person. They lay it on the line for you, and working them like dogs sometimes is not the way to do it. If you pick, say, the three best coaches in the Southeastern Conference today, you'd find out if you really looked into it that all three of the guys will coach the game different. They coach according to their personalities and the type of kids that they have, I think. And I think we used to coach everybody the same, and that's a totally different way.
Wow.
Yeah. I had heard a coach say one time, you can treat players fairly, but you don't necessarily have to treat them equally.
Well, that's a great statement right there.
And I thought, I never forgot that. You can treat them fairly, but you don't necessarily treat them equally.
Man.
No.
Hey, look, Sonny, we want to thank you, man. We about to, I got a couple minutes up here, but I thought I'd start wrapping up now. But we definitely want to thank you for being on the show. And wow, I learned things I didn't know that, just looking someone up doesn't mean crap, so it was good to actually hear you and hear your thoughts, so I
think I'm in my upper 80s. I don't want to let anybody know exactly, but I still love the game, and I'm going to stay around the game as long as they allow me to. That's how much the game means to me. And to have friends like Rick that I've known forever since he was a very young man. And, that's valuable to me to have friends that you remember from back then.
That's awesome. Rick,
I try to call Sonny at least once a month just to talk, because we got to tell him stories. Sonny, we had Glenn Combs on last week.
Well, Glenn Combs, one of the great shooters I've ever seen. He really was. He could shoot the ball. They had some players at Virginia Tech back in the day that probably will never get the credit that they were for college players because the game evolves or gets different. But Glenn Combs was one of the best shooters I've ever seen.
Awesome.
He could really. I was one of the best scorers you ever seen, right, Rick?
Oh, no question. No, I used to have the box scores from the games.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I really appreciate this trip down memory lane and taking on some great knowledge. And I hope our fans actually get to learn something from this. This has definitely been a very insightful show today. And Sonny, we want to thank you. Rick, thank you for coming back, man, and hanging in with me. And wow, I'm looking forward to we do this again. And Sonny, man, big props. Thanks so much. And
thank you very much. My pleasure, fellas.
Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, guys. Take care, guys. Have a good weekend. All right.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Peace.
Bye, Sonny. Bye.
Sassy B Worldwide Productions. With over 25 years of entertainment experience, we have done it all. Celebrity appearances, red carpet events, image consultation, and branding design. Our clients range from American football stars to Hollywood celebrities and everyone in between. Want to make a splash in the entertainment industry? Then it's time to get sassy. SassyBWorldwide.com.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. Remember, you can keep up with every episode by subscribing via our website. Follow us on social media and tell your friends about us. Next week, new guests, more basketball tips, more basketball stories about the game we all love. Till then, be safe and keep your eyes on the ball.
Give him a bone.